Hey, Marshall here to tell you about an incredibly easy way anyone who loves brewing and drinking beer can save a little bit of money. In addition to supporting everything we do here at Brewlosophy, the American Homebrewers Association recently introduced their free Brew Guru mobile app. It offers a searchable database of homebrew recipes, including popular craft beer clones and hundreds of award-winning recipes from the National Homebrew Competition. What's more, Brew Guru has a searchable map of deals at breweries, beer bars, and homebrew shops. Grab the free Brew Guru app for iPhone and Android devices today and follow the path to great beer. Back in the early days of homebrewing, equipment and ingredients were pretty difficult to find. In fact, I've heard stories from brewers who would purchase old cans of malt extract and packets of baker's yeast from the grocery store shelves just so they could make beer. As people began to realize how much fun brewing beer at home could be, demand for quality increased, which led to the opening of shops in communities around the world who focused on supplying homebrewers not only with fresher ingredients and actual brewing gear, but a place to hang out, meet others who shared a passion for beer, and educating people about the brewing process. Nowadays, there are homebrew shops, sometimes multiple, in pretty much every city you go to, and it's my very strong opinion that these shops are a large part of the reason homebrewing has grown so much and is the rad hobby it is today. You're listening to the Brewlosophy Podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and we're doing something a little bit different in this episode. There's been some talk lately about how homebrewing is in decline, or at the very least has plateaued. And as someone who not only loves this hobby and wants to see it continue to grow, but who unexpectedly found myself kind of on the industry side of things with Brewlosophy, the topic of today's show is really important to me. And as boring as it might sound up front, I think it's really good for everyone who loves brewing as much as me to at least consider. Joining me to talk about the current state of the homebrewing industry is Ron Rivers, one of the founders of Love2brew, which is a New Jersey-based homebrew shop that has a growing online presence as well. In the few years since I first met Ron, he's proven himself to be a very thoughtful member of the brewing community who I trust wants nothing more than to see this hobby thrive, just like I do. Ron will be answering a few of my questions and sharing some fascinating insights, some of which he'll also be sharing more formally in a talk to industry professionals at HomebrewCon in Portland this year. Speaking of HomebrewCon, it's literally just 1 month away from today, and I couldn't be more excited. New merch has been ordered, the live recording schedule is being worked on, and the beers are being brewed. If you are attending, please stop by our booth for a beer and a chat. We'd love to meet you. We just got the booth map, and I think it's going to be pretty difficult to miss us. We've got a nice big rectangle of a booth right smack in the middle of the expo hall. So we're going to be arriving early on Wednesday, June 27th to set up things, and when that's done around 6 p.m. that evening, we're going to be heading to Imperial Bottle Shop on Division Street for Imperial Yeast's Insane in the Yeast Strain event. If you're in town that night and you're looking for something to do, the event's free. All you do is pay for your beer. We've still got a few spots left on the early bird guest list for our karaoke party, which is happening Thursday night. That's the 28th from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. You can show up and leave whenever you want, of course, drinking and singing and hanging out if that's your gig. Go ahead and send me an email, marshall@brewlosophy.com, and I'll send you details on how you can make a donation early to secure your spot. It's going to be a really good time. If you're going to be in or around Yakima, Washington at the end of September, come party with contributor Brian Hall and me at the Fresh Hop Ale Festival. We'll be hanging out with our homies from Yakima Valley Hops for the weekend, drinking beer, doing our thing. Hit me up if you're around. We can grab a beer. It'd be a lot of fun. Huge thanks to everyone who's been using our links to do their online shopping. It's a huge part of what allows us to continue bringing you the content that we do. If you want to help us out, you can head over to brewlosophy.com/support to find a list of links to bookmark and use whenever you do your shopping online. We'd really appreciate you doing that. If you want to be rewarded for your support, you can become a patron of Brewlosophy by pledging a small monthly contribution. In return, you'll receive things like access to the Brew Crew private forum, secret contributor recipes, unique discounts at Yakima Valley Hops, and an invitation to a monthly live Q&A with a very special guest. As of the posting of this episode, you've got a couple days to make your pledge and get in on the next round of rewards, so hop to it. Joining us for the June Q&A livecast are the fermentation experts from Imperial Yeast, who are not just knowledgeable about their microbiological little buddies, but they're pretty cool people too. So it's going to be a good Q&A. Learn about all of the rewards you can get for supporting us at patreon.com/brewlosophy. Finally, I've got a huge favor to ask. Something that's super easy and will make me feel really, really good. Please, if you haven't already, leave a rating and a review of the Brewlosophy podcast. Wherever it is you listen to podcasts, we're pushing like 260, 270 reviews right now. And those are really helpful. In addition to giving us feedback that we actually read and take to heart, those ratings apparently help others who may not know about Brewlosophy to find us. So thanks to everyone who has already done this. We really do appreciate it. Okay, feedback this week is brought to you by Brewers Hardware, who specialize in tri-clover compatible sanitary fittings, conical fermenters, kettles, and brew stands. Brewers Hardware offers a variety of unique and hard to find items for both the home and craft brewing markets, including high quality stainless fittings at competitive prices and very fast shipping. They're really excited to announce the release of the BCS 482 control system. This thing's a monster. It provides everything needed to fully automate your brewery. Learn more about this and the other great gear they offer at brewershardware.com. And don't forget to mention Brewlosophy at checkout to receive a free little gift. That's brewershardware.com. All right, Doug Chapman wrote in to say, I just listened to the episode on your yeast blend with bootleg biology and wanted to pick some up for a Pilsner I'm brewing, but when I checked the website, it said they were out of stock. Any idea when or if it will be available again? Doug, yes, this is a question we've actually received a few times. And I'm excited that people are getting their packs of yeast. I've heard from a few people who've been brewing with it, and it sounds like it's doing exactly what we expected it to do. But it is not currently available. So the project that we set up with Bootleg Biology is the yeast is going to be released on a kind of a seasonal basis. So the next homebrew presale I reached out and I asked Jeff Mello from Bootleg Biology. He told me that they plan to do the next presale. So you got to pre-order these yeast. That means you got to be on it, and we'll try to announce when the pre-sale starts. And then they make the amount of yeast that they need and they ship it all out. So the next one is likely going to be in early July. So you got about a month or so, a month and a half before you can order this yeast. But, like I said, we're going to announce it. We'll probably post some stuff on social and just make sure that people know that you're going to have about a week and a half, 2 weeks to pre-order your pack of the Brewlosophy blend through Bootleg Biology. And that way you can have it to use for a few months before you can order it again. My understanding is that this yeast will be released on a kind of like a quarterly basis type of thing. So yeah, that's the answer. It is not currently available. And given the fact that it's a blend and kind of the ideas that we have about the way yeast blends work, I'd recommend talking to a friend of yours to steal some of that yeast off, but it may be that one of those yeast strains kind of overtakes the other one. I'm not totally sure how that works, but so look for it in July, Doug, and anyone else out there who's interested in getting their hands on some Brewlosophy blend. If you have any show feedback, you can send it to feedback@brewlosophy.com, or you can leave us a message by calling 951-444-0320. So at HomebrewCon in Minneapolis last year, a group of us were sampling beers at one of the booths when this dude walks up to chat. He says he's listened to the show and enjoys the website. Now, I don't mean to be presumptuous, but I noticed he had a kind of a familiar feel about him. And it was pretty obvious Jersey noticed this as well. On top of the two finger he wore on his upper lip, he introduced himself as Devil. Yeah, this guy was a fighter pilot, just like Jersey. They hit it off, and they've been text buddies ever since. I think Devil is based out of Florida. I could be wrong about that. But a couple months ago, he told Jersey he would be landing briefly in Fresno and that he had a beer he wanted to have reviewed on the show. So Jersey gets a text a few weeks later with details on Devil's trip. And unfortunately, Jersey wasn't working. I think he was out of town at the time. So he texted some other lower rank dude who would be, I guess, managing the desk or whatever with instructions to, quote, pick up a very important package when Devil lands. Well, later on that day, Jersey gets a text from this guy behind the counter saying, your very important package has arrived. And along with the text came a picture of a beer bottle from Devil.
1 minute beer review with Jersey and Tim.
It's dark, it's darky, 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 it's dark beer. Could be Schwartz, could be stout, could be anything but out.
It's not that dark.
Woo! Smell that,
Holy
dude. That'll put you on your ass. Dude, it's wait, no. What are you supposed to do to make this so you can get a smell again? Like you
Here, put your nose on my crack.
I did it. And we're best friends just like our dogs now.
Wow.
Wait, don't taste it until we figure out the smell. It's like maybe chocolate or something. I'm just trying to like recage because like every time I smell it again, I don't smell it. Chocolate is what I smell, Timmy. What do you smell? I'm so excited. This is something new and different and stuff. You smell failure is what you smell.
Yeah. I don't smell chocolate.
Let's taste it.
I don't want to.
Ooh. There's chocolate in there, but maybe not. It's strong, but it's quite strong.
It's definitely strong.
I like it, but it's heavy.
You definitely have to sip it because it's not Coors Light.
Because it ain't Coors Light.
I feel myself getting...
Dude, it's really growing on me. I like so to me, I feel like there's an aftertaste that I haven't identified. And maybe you could chime in.
I'm not getting an aftertaste. I like the way it ends. It's not lingering on.
Everybody involved with you likes the way it ends. Man, I'll tell you, this might be the first beer that we've ever done where I like the smell more than the taste. It smells amazing, dude.
It's potent.
Oh, it smells amazing. It's like chocolate bars and a warm fire and like being held by somebody who cares about you.
I'm feeling the chocolate now.
I feel like after the third one of these, we would think these are amazing, and we would be like, "This is all we want to drink."
I think after the third one of these, you'd think cyanide was amazing.
Yeah,
I think
I'd be toe up.
I think we're drunker now than we were a minute ago when we started. I'd like this. It's delicious. I have no idea what it is.
Jers, I'll tell you this right now that this was hand delivered by another pilot.
This is Devil's beer.
It's a barley wine.
What's a barley wine?
It's very strong.
This one was aged. I believe he aged it in oak barrels, and he brewed this beer almost 2 years ago.
Timmy, I'm surprised that you didn't pick up the oak because nobody knows wood like you, buddy.
Thank you.
He was so nice about the whole process of flying it down that I was worried that I was going to hate it.
Dude, this beer's...
you loved it from the get.
I love the smell of it.
The smell's amazing.
Oh.
The way it tastes, though, even with all that, it's almost 14% alcohol, I believe.
Wow. Holy crap.
This beer kicks ass, dude. This is award-winning barley wine style. This is like... this is 45 to 50 point beer.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Mr. I run this program.
Mean, no more than
I'll give
50.
it two Jersey
50.
Tims.
I've no one's ass to kiss. I'm dead serious. This beer's so
well,
good.
then I'm glad that we decided that we liked it. Otherwise, we'd be made to look like fools right now.
Well, you did.
Well, here you go. You don't have enough juniper
Hey,
content.
Tim, my face is getting warm drinking this. I don't know about you, but
I love it.
oh my God, it's good.
Yeah.
So first off, let's give a little bit of kudos to my friends Jersey and Tim, who seemed pretty open-minded when drinking this beer. They didn't know first off that it was from Devil, and they had no idea that it was a barley wine. Devil dropped off this big old barley wine, and the two guys really seemed to at least appreciate it for what it was. Now, if Devil was here, I'd give him a hug, because to me, there are certain characteristics that you can get with a barley wine that I find really undesirable. And usually that's kind of a hot alcohol burn or kind of a too sharp of a bitterness. That's usually what I experience in kind of fresher barley wines. This barley wine, I'm telling you, was one of the top 5 best barley wines, professional and homebrewer combined, one of the top 5 best I've ever had. It was so delicious. And a part of me just, wants to believe that the fact that it was flown between the legs of Devil from Florida all the way to California is part of what made that possible. So Devil, thank you so much. You're an amazing brewer. You're an awesome dude. And hopefully we get to see you at HomebrewCon this year. If you have a beer that you want to have reviewed by Jersey and Tim, you can email me, marshall@brewlosophy.com, and we will get you all set up. All right, when we come back, Ron Rivers from Love to Brew will be with us. Stick around. Family-owned Atlantic Brew Supply is the largest homebrew shop in the Southeast. No gimmicks, no multinational corporate overlords, and no BS. They offer exclusive malts, yeast, and more from local artisans, as well as award-winning recipe kits. They also sell professional brewing gear and cask equipment from sister companies ABS Commercial and Cask Supply. Most ingredients are available by the ounce, plus Atlantic Brew Supply has an on-site calculator to help you craft your best brew. Orders are processed same day, and 2-day shipping is guaranteed for East Coast customers. Get 15% off your first order using promo code BREWPOD. That's BRUPOD at AtlanticBrewSupply.com. When dumping wort-soaked grain in leftover low-gravity wort while cleaning up after a brew day, do you ever wonder what your true efficiency would be if that wort made its way to the kettle instead? Using the brew bag, a fabric filter for all mash tuns and brewing methods, allows you to capture every last drop of wort. Not only does this increase kettle efficiency, it lowers your grain bill, which saves you money. Throwing wort in the trash is like dumping a 12-pack down the drain and just doesn't make sense. Use the brew bag and leave no wort behind. I've been using these filters for a long time and recommend them to everyone. I never have to worry about a stuck sparge, and cleanup is fast and easy. Go grab yourself a brew bag fabric filter at brewinabag.com and be sure to use code TBP17 at checkout to get a discount on your order.
Compact and simple to use with a small footprint for brewing indoors, the Grainfather makes it easy for you to brew professional quality beers at home. The Grainfather is an all-in-one brewing system that lets you brew all grain beer in a single compact stainless steel unit. It uses an electric heating element and pump to maintain a constant temperature and to circulate the wort during the mashing and cooling stages. It also comes with a counterflow chiller to reduce chilling times and produce high-quality wort. And now, with the addition of their conical fermenter, the Grainfather takes things one step further by offering homebrewers state-of-the-art temperature-controlled fermentation just like commercial breweries use. And with the Grainfather Recipe Creator and Connect app, you can easily design a recipe, sync your brewing system with your phone, and then just sit back and relax as the app takes over and assures that you maintain your scheduled mash temps and boil schedule. Head to grainfather.com to purchase your all-in-one brewing system today and to sign up for their free recipe creator tool. Once more, head on over to grainfather.com, that's grainfather.com, and get started today.
So I started Brewlosophy back in early 2014 during a time when the hobby of homebrewing was on a seemingly unending uphill climb. Since then, of course, things have changed a little bit, and here to chat with me about these changes, among other things, is Love2brew's Ron Rivers, who I first met back in 2015 at what was then called the National Homebrewers Conference. Ron, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
What was it? Was it NHC 2015 where we actually first met in person? I think that's right.
It must have been. I mean, if you started in 2014, right?
Yeah.
We were doing all the shows, and I think we may have touched base online, but that's probably the first time we had met in person, I think.
Yeah, right. And since then, we've done some recipe kits together, and we've worked together in other ways. It's been a good little relationship. So I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about your background and how Love2brew came to be.
Sure. Happy to. So Love2brew was founded in 2011. I had been homebrewing, as a casual hobby. I'd been brewing for a few years, just kind of diving into it and really enjoying it. At the time, prior to Love2brew, I was working for a kitchen restaurant technology company. I sold kitchen restaurant hardware. So I had a nice gig, but I really, I was kind of at a point in my life where I really didn't want to be doing that anymore. And I really wanted to do something that I was passionate about and knew I could make, an impact. And so it was natural to kind of want to do something aligned with something I was personally interested in, not just some random job, so to speak.
Right.
And really in 2011, the idea for Love2brew came from just observing the trends in the homebrew market. I've always been an avid reader, and I'm really into business books and understanding trends. And homebrewing in 2011, if you imagine how you mentioned when you started, it was like this seemingly unending, rocket ship up.
Right.
We were kind of in 2011 at the, near beginning of the knee of the bell curve, if you will, the very beginning. Yeah. It wasn't the total beginning, but we were, it had just kind of started to take off. And the big thing that I noticed with Love2brew was that, there was a major player on the West Coast with, more beer. There was a major player in Minnesota, Central U.S. with Northern and Midwest, but there really wasn't a major player on the East Coast. That, and I felt that their websites at that time really were lacking. I felt they were about 5 years behind the times. So I said, if we come in with a strategy of making the user experience, especially online, just that much easier, that much better, we might have an opportunity to really establish a foothold in the industry. And that's kind of what we did. And that was the plan. So, my plan from the beginning, very transparent, and I've always been transparent about this, was never just to run a small local homebrew shop. I'm the kind of person where if I want to make change and I want to, impact people, I want to do it in the biggest and best way possible.
Go big or go home, right?
Yeah. And I felt that I really needed to build a machine, so to speak, that could handle that and could service as much people as possible. So that's kind of how we started. I have a founding partner, Mark Spezio. And, there wasn't a tremendous secret to how we are, where we are today. It was a lot of work, a lot of grinding, a lot of long hours. For the first 2 years, we worked 7 days a week and just invested every single dollar back into the business. We've just built it from there. Always always focusing on efficiencies, improving our service level, improving our offerings. And that's kind of, we've kind of, what I feel like we've done a good job of kind of fulfilling the niche that we wanted to fulfill and offering the value. And most importantly, really, I mean, I'm lucky and fortunate enough to be able to say this. It's because I have a really good team. Like, we just have great guys at the shop.
Yeah.
Tom, Andrew, Matt, and Mark. These are guys who are, care about what we're doing. They're really passionate. They're knowledgeable at homebrewing, and they're what makes Love to Brew. We've at this point especially, they're really the core of our team.
Yeah, and I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of these guys at past couple homebrew cons. And I agree with you. I mean, you got such an awesome team. People who obviously love to brew, which is super cheesy that I said that. I'm sure you get it often. But yeah, and it's incredible to me to think that just because of you've got the personality. I have to believe it's a personality thing to be able to go out there and build what you have. Not only do you have the local homebrew shop side of it, but to warehouse stuff for online and to do all of that. It's pretty impressive, man. It's no secret that I've always been interested in the idea of running a homebrew shop, but the fact that you were able to do it, I mean, I've looked at what goes into it, and it's no small feat.
Yeah, I think that's, whenever someone thinks about like a hobby business, they're like, oh, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be like kind of doing my hobby.
Right.
And it's probably the same like relation to like opening a brewery, right? It's like you love brewing until you have to brew the same amber ale, 200 times in the same year.
No shit, man. God. Yeah. So somebody who runs this huge homebrew shop, you get to see things from a different perspective, like the underbelly, if you will, of an industry that in many ways sustains what for most, like you said, is just this hobby, right? Like, you're getting into this thing that's a hobby at first. And then as you get more and more into the business side of it, it becomes not a hobby. It becomes a job. What's that like? What does the underbelly look like?
Well, I mean, it's just like, I would say it's comparable to like any other business, I should say, I imagine, but it's just a lot of work, right? And I think that's the big thing is you have to keep the big vision in mind. That's always something that kept me motivated, especially during some of the initial times. The first 2 to 4 years of opening any business is a struggle, right? It's a struggle. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to pay my employees.
Right.
I don't know if I'm gonna pay myself. I don't know if I'm gonna go bankrupt tomorrow, right? There's all these range of emotions that go along with being an entrepreneur, and they're very frequent and they fluctuate very dramatically. So for me, it's always been about just keeping your eye on your initial vision, which is to build something to empower a community, to build something to empower individuals, to gain new skills, to make new friends, to learn a talent, learn mastery of something that is fun, and it's something that always contributes to sharing and good times. So
right.
Even in the worst of times, you just say, you know what, we're doing this for the right reasons. This isn't some like pump and dump stock scheme. This is we're building a community, and no one said it'd be easy, but we got to do it.
Yeah, man. It's weird because I appreciate you referred to this as kind of an entrepreneurial this venture, and I've way before Brewlosophy was ever a thing. The story of Brewlosophy is very, very unconventional. I never intended for this to become a thing, but now that it is, I have to manage it more like it's a business, like it's work. Yeah. And I'm sitting here recording on a Saturday morning, because I have to get a show out there because we've got sponsors. Thank you, by the way, Love to Brew. To keep happy, and we have to do these things, and it really does. I think there's whether it's going into professional brewing or somehow getting involved in what I'm referring to as the home brewing industry, there really is. You have to accept that once it becomes work, it is now work, and there's expectations that come with work. If I've planned to brew a batch of beer and I'm just a hobbyist and I get a cold or I can't brew it, then who cares? I'm out a keg of beer for an extra week. If I have to have that beer done so that I can collect data and so that I can publish an article that's expected to be out there, I got to brew that beer regardless of whether I've got a cold or not, Yeah,
no, totally. I mean, it really is. And, on the business side of the homebrewing thing, it's like because we're in a hobby industry and because it's something that people are so passionate about, I think that we have customers who, it's maybe comparatively, for example, to something like an Amazon or a Walmart. It's like, well, if Walmart messes something up, you expect that, right? It's right. Walmart. But like, if your homebrew shop messes something up, people get hurt. I mean, like emotionally hurt by having their order done. And it ruins their plans. It ruins their weekends.
Yeah.
And it's very frustrating. So, you have to, it's the same, you're totally right. It's the same thing. Like we take that responsibility on by having the public trust and by having people who were willing to contribute their hard-earned money to our vision and our ventures. It's you take that level of responsibility, and it's something you have to take super seriously, because it can be lost really quickly. And I am proud to say that myself and more importantly my team we're very serious about just the customer service aspect. I think that's really what Love2brew has been able to carve our niche out of, is just the level of service, the personal phone calls, the quickness of shipping.
Right.
We're just really, we have some very strict standards, and our team is kind of like we're casual. It's a kind of laissez-faire environment. It's a lot of empowerment. It's like, look, these are your responsibilities. Like, you can do them in any way you see fit.
Yep.
But don't mess it up.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
If it gets messed up, that's when I have to come to the shop and we talk. And but I'm lucky. Like, it's a very rare occasion because the guys take it seriously.
Yeah.
And they get it.
Well, and I feel like, and I have to believe that this is the case in most other hobby businesses or but hobbyists are they take their hobby seriously. They, it is, it's personal to them when they have a connection with somebody. It's funny, and I'm just this measly little, I write articles about this experiments we do, and I talk on a microphone and then put it out into the world for people to hear. But if I respond to somebody's email, sometimes they're like, man, I can't believe you took the time out of your day. Like, they care about this stuff, and I'll hear from people who get good customer service from a place like Love2brew, or who have that who have that kit replaced without having to send the other one back because they missed the wrong yeast or whatever it was. That matters to people in a hobby like this.
Yeah, and I wouldn't, to your credit, Marshall, I wouldn't discredit yourself with your work and your art. I think all homebrewing is comparable, and what you do, your research, it's all comparable to any form of art, right? You're putting yourself into your creativity and that output, and that's a big part of yourself. So both on the side of homebrewers, when they make a beer and we share a beer with our friends and family, we're sharing an extension of ourselves, right? We're sharing a part of who we are, and I think that's you should I appreciate your humility, but what you do is tremendous, and you've whether or not you want to admit it, you have fundamentally changed the way people think about homebrewing.
Oh, geez. For better or for worse, I guess, right? That's well, and I appreciate that. And, I've been known to say that, homebrewing is no longer my hobby, but homebrew experimentation really is. And that's how I have to look at it. And that's what keeps me going. But yeah, it's an interesting industry to be a part of. I'll tell you that. And there's so much more that goes on, kind of under the surface than I ever expected. And it's not bad. It's not bad. But, there's been a lot of talk lately about things like the slowed growth in both craft beer and obviously more specific to us homebrewing. I've heard some really interesting hypotheses as to the causes of this. And it feels like this is something that kind of has started in the last, 2 or 3 years. I know you're planning to give kind of a detailed talk at HomebrewCon this year to industry professionals, but I was wondering if you could offer some insights as to what you think is going on here.
Sure. Yeah. So, homebrewing is not so unique if you look at the big picture. And I think that's kind of where a lot of my vision, kind of like what I'm going to be talking to the industry panel about. And obviously there's some stuff a lot of stuff I'm going to share today, and some stuff I'm not. But overall, the homebrewing is kind of experiencing a slowdown, I think, for a number of reasons, in craft beer as well. And I think it's more to do with a fundamental shift in the changing landscape of economics and business in the U.S. than it is homebrewing specifically. I think what's happening in our industry now is either happened in other industries already, or will happen to other industries. Mm-hmm. Homebrewing being a relatively small industry combined. I think combined it's like $350 million a year. Or maybe you get different estimates. I know Bart Watson's done something from the Brewer Association that was $1 billion. But then in my research and R&D for the project, the numbers I was getting from multiple sources was around 350 million. So in the scale of the U.S. economy, that's an incredibly small niche.
That's tiny. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we to some extent we kind of hit under the radar. Plus, we're a hobby industry, so it's people are they want to spend money here. But just like anything else, trends matter. So right away, homebrewing statistically is best during a recession. In terms of when I say the industry, it's best during a recession. And I think as of last week or the week before, we're at a very low unemployment rate, and of course that's maybe some people have dropped out of looking for work, but at the end of the day, statistically, we are at a low unemployment rate right now in this period of time. So what that means is like, okay, if you have a family, you have kids, you have a wife, whatever the case may be, and you work a 9 to 5 or a 9 to 6, whatever, Monday through Friday, that day or two, that extra time you have becomes, that much more valuable. And so it becomes, a competition of sorts. Like, do I spend time doing something I love? Do I spend time doing homebrewing, or do I go to my daughter's soccer game?
There's not a single homebrewing dad or mom out there who hasn't experienced this very thought.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. It is challenging. And I think, when you talk about, how you said when you were getting in at 2014, and really even when we started 2011, it was during the major recession of the 2008 financial crash. So you had so many people who had a lot of time on their hands, and they were looking for a way to kind of just cut pennies. So, homebrewing, the argument's made on both sides. You could be a money saver, or it could not be. But I think it definitely can be if you buy, like, for example, a starter kit and extract kits, and you don't go nuts with it. If you don't really allow the bug to take over, so to speak, you can brew beer for about half the cost as you're going to buy it, assuming you're buying craft beer,
sure,
right? Assuming you're not going to switch to Natty Light, which
hey, don't hate, dude, don't hate, yeah. Exactly.
But so right away, that was a big part of the boom, and that has changed. Another thing that kind of impacts to the behind the scenes is the proliferation of breweries in the U.S. And homebrewing has traditionally always been regarded from a business standpoint, as a cyclical industry. It's a hobby industry, so it's impacted, and it has its ups and its downs. And obviously, there's a normal yearly cycle. Homebrewing happens to be very big in the probably October to May, June-ish, and then during those super hot months, it slows down.
Right.
And then school starts, and that's kind of a busy time for a lot of people. And then it picks up again around late October. But with the brewery scene being what it is, I just don't believe that it could ever, it's not going to reach the polar swings that it used to, only because the mass craft brew movement, and I'm only speaking, I can only speak obviously from New Jersey, where we're located. When we opened Love2brew, there was 4 breweries in the state. I believe right now there's 95 breweries with 45 in planning for this year.
Crazy. That's crazy.
Yes.
Man.
So that's been it's only been 7 years, right? So, I mean, you're talking about 100%, not 100%, probably I have to do the math, but over 80% growth in that area in a very short period of time. I shouldn't say 80%, 10, 20, 30 times growth is the actual amount. So, we're seeing tremendous shifts. So what that does is a number of things, right? So if you are someone who might have brewed, because one of the big reasons people used to brew is you couldn't find really good beer.
Right. Yeah.
So I think right away we've just kind of carved out this huge niche that we used to take advantage of, because now it's in New Jersey, especially, which is a very small state. I mean, it's literally 3 hours from top to bottom. You can drive 30 minutes in any direction and find a good brewery.
Yeah, right.
So right away, it's all right, I might not even Google. I might have been a person who might have Googled, New Jersey homebrew or New Jersey homebrew kit or something, 10 years ago, but that might not come into my mind now. It's well, whatever, I'll just go spend $15 on a Friday with my buddies and have, 3 or 4 pints.
Sure.
Now, granted, I would argue that, many beers you could brew at home, especially with enough time and effort, are going to be just as good, if not better, as some of the breweries out there. And I think I could make that argument because many of the home brewers open breweries, right? I mean, that's one thing that people often disconnect. But brewers don't wake up and say, "Oh, it's time to open a brewery." It's "Oh, I've been doing this for 7 years." Yeah,
homebrewing is like a stepping stone for a lot of professional brewers.
Absolutely. So that kind of chimes into okay, that cuts a small piece out, and then. And then of course, I mean, just be candid. And I'm going to preface this statement by saying I don't have any personal ill will about the statement I'm about to say, or I don't have an opinion about it one way or the other. But it is a truth that breweries do give away stuff to customers, right? They give away stuff to home brewers that they were friends with.
Oh, yeah.
And that happens all over the place. Oh, yeah, here's a sack of grain, no problem. Here's a bunch of yeast, no problem. Oh, here's an extra pound of hops, we have no problem. Not necessarily taking into account that you are doing direct damage to the local homebrew shop that that sold the brewery guy his first kit.
Right, exactly.
So it's almost like it's an interesting phenomenon in the homebrew industry, especially the hobbyists, is as people accelerate, it's almost like the veterans, to some extent, almost cannibalize the industry a little bit.
Without intention, right? They're not doing it intentionally. And it makes sense because everybody wants the best deal. And I get that. This isn't the cheapest hobby on earth. It's also not, buying old cars and building them out. But I can see, that there's no questioning that has an impact on your business, on the local homebrew shops and whatnot.
Absolutely. And I want to stress, and I'm glad you made that point, because I want to make this very clear to everyone. I don't blame anyone for doing that. Like, I think that's absolutely natural, and that's exactly what you should do. You as an individual should get the most bang for your buck, and that's up to the homebrew shops as a business, myself included, to figure out how to win your business and earn it. I don't believe for a second, and this is, I think, especially amongst some of the real like homebrew veterans, this is like an attitude that I think is almost like a catalyst to their own problem. Is no customers owe us anything, right? I don't think that for a second. But facts are facts, data is data. If breweries are giving away hops and yeast and grain, well, that's stuff that the customer would have most likely bought from a homebrew shop, right? So that's like an impact. So I think that's kind of changed things. Again, I don't think that's the end all be all. It's just like one little factor.
Yeah.
I think another factor, if we're staying on this, is the shift to really the explosiveness and innovation and the transformation into like a new knowledge economy. And so this is kind of high level, but what a knowledge economy, when I say that phrase, a knowledge economy is essentially an economic system where the most advanced form of production is based on like highly skilled labor that's easily transferable between organizations. Like a modern example being Silicon Valley. You have these programmers which are highly skilled, but if SQL, C++, and whatever, PHP, any company that needs those skills, you can go to and work for them. Like It doesn't take a lot of work. And it's replaced the old form of the most advanced form of production, which was manufacturing, which was low skilled and highly transferable. Mm-hmm. And I define most advanced by the greatest returns for input.
Sure.
So what does that mean in relation to homebrewing? Well, now we have a lot of technical innovators. We have a lot of innovators who are making technology work for homebrewing in a way that has never worked before. And because of the mass communication and sales channels available now with the internet and being the massive interconnectivity, all that is going manufacturer direct. So, if you rewind back even 7 years ago when we started, we had a pretty solidified what we call the 4-tier vertical. So you had a manufacturer, a distributor, a retailer, Love2brew, and then a customer, right? But now, if someone invents a new stainless steel kettle or a stainless steel fermenter or whatever the case may be, they in many cases go direct to the customers.
Right.
And that is it's a win for the customers because they're getting a lower price, right? They're not having 2 layers of price tacked on top of it. And the manufacturers can just move products quicker. But obviously it creates conflict for the local homebrew shop. Because the question is, if you can't add a lot of variety, like some of the products you can't add because the manufacturer pricing is so low that you're going to spend, I'm going to make this example up, but you might spend $150 to make 20, right? And that's just not a viable business model.
No.
And, and again, it goes back to the same thing. There's no blame to be had. This is exactly what markets should do. And my point about how homebrewing is being impacted just like every other market, this is not exclusive to homebrewing. If you look at any hobby industry or really any industry,
right?
Because of communication, because of the way technology is growing exponentially in relation to processing power against cost and size, you have the ability to create something magnificent and just give it to the people instantaneously.
It makes me think of the music industry and how home recording and self-production and all of that has just completely changed that landscape. You can become a superstar from your computer and Facebook, you know? And you don't have to go through the old tiered system that involved, getting a record deal and having a whole like record producer and a manager and all that stuff. You can, if you're good enough, you can just do it straight from home and distribute it all yourself. It's you kind of see it everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's no surprise that it's happening, right? And I think that's one of the big things from a retailer perspective. And this is one of the things I kind of try to hit home when I do these industry talks is, you can't sit here and gripe about the customers. Like that's not the reality of our situation. The reality is you must adapt.
That's right. Yeah.
We must know, like that's business 101. Like you have to be able to identify trends and you have to be able to adapt to those trends to serve your customers' needs.
Yeah.
I mean, and that is, I think, one of the big challenges we're going to see and one of the big potential problems in the industry is I think there is a risk of the industry having challenges. Not all businesses, and I say this, full disclosure, I think Love2brew is well insulated because I think, we have our focus in the right place. But I think, some of the more veteran shops that don't truly try and innovate, they don't truly try and, they're guys who are running, guys or girls, obviously, who are running the shop as something they enjoy, but, they've had the same selection of products for the last 30 years. These small mom and pop shops are going to have a challenging time in the next years to come. And if they're not willing to learn new skills, if they're not willing to get on there and understand Google AdWords and A/B testing and Facebook advertising and Instagram, if you're not willing to do that, there's not much that can be done to help your scenario. I mean, there are things to be done, and we can talk a little bit more about that, some solutions I'm proposing, but that's, it's a challenge. I think it's going to be a challenge for some people.
Well, and we've already seen the fallout. I mean, what was it? I honestly, in the last week, I think I've seen 2 posts on Facebook of people saying, hey man, this place is going out of business. They've been my homebrew shop for 20, 25 years and now we're not going to have anything. And it's that I don't know if I want to go to the extent of saying inability to adapt, but that I think, there's an element of that, and adapting is hard. That kind of, when you've been around for 20 years and you're the go-to shop, and then all of a sudden things aren't working out as well for you. I mean, that's a bummer. I could talk about this for hours, but we've got to take a quick break. When we come back, I'd like to dig a little bit deeper, maybe into some of the specific concerns, some more specific concerns, as well as some things that we as homebrewers can do to help. We'll be right back. Shopping for brewing supplies online can be a real hassle, which is why we recommend Love2brew. They've got great prices, super fast shipping, and they carry exclusive products like East Coast Yeast, the Brewers Essentials brand, and their award-winning beer recipe kits. They're also the only place you can pick up your very own Brewlosophy recipe kit. The numbers don't lie. Love2brew has hundreds of 5-star reviews, and thousands of brewers are choosing them for their supplies and ingredients each year. Experience the difference at Love2brew.com. That's love, the number 2, brew.com. After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste more time chilling wort. I've tried so many different options, and ultimately I settled on the super efficient immersion chillers made by Jaded Brewing. With the King Cobra and Hydra, I'm able to chill my entire batch of wort from boiling to just a few degrees above groundwater temperature in as little as 6 minutes. If an immersion chiller is right for your brewery, then do yourself a favor and check out all of the rad options Jaded Brewing has to offer at jadedbrewing.com, and be sure to let them know Brewlosophy sent you. As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer, and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts. Founded in 1978 by brewing pioneer Charlie Papazian, the American Homebrewers Association is a division of the Brewers Association focused specifically on protecting and promoting the hobby of homebrewing. In addition to their work lobbying for the rights of homebrewers across the country, they're also the primary sponsor of brewlosophy.com. By joining the AHA, not only are you supporting their cause, but you get a ton of benefits as well. Discounts at breweries across the U.S., early access to tickets for events like the Great American Beer Festival, and you get to attend HomebrewCon, the world's biggest gathering of homebrewers. Head over to brewlosophy.com/AHA now to sign up to become a member. All right, so we've talked about some of the bigger picture stuff. Now I'd like to tread, some potentially hazier waters by focusing on things that are perhaps a little bit more specific. Less than a decade ago, it seemed like craft brewers were very, very proud of their independence, using the fact that they weren't, quote, big beer as a way to market their product. Like that was a driving, promotional tool. Then all of a sudden, big beer started creeping into what many viewed as this, sort of protected space. Breweries like Goose Island, Elysian, and craziest to me still, Lagunitas were paid gigantic sums of money by these corporate breweries for a stake in their companies. And that's had a pretty huge impact, I think, on, public opinion and how, the things that people are willing to spend their money on these days. Our focus today obviously isn't on craft breweries, of course, but this big money creep recently made its way into homebrewing. And I'm sure you've got some thoughts on that, Ron.
Yeah. So, and we should mention for those of you guys listening, if you haven't already, Marshall and I had collaborated when this first happened. We're talking about the InBev's acquisition of Northern Brewer Midwest.
Yeah.
Specifically, this is the facts, right? So, and I'll be clear, this is not a hit piece on any of them, but just the facts is they were acquired. And if you guys haven't already, you should probably preface what I'm about to talk about by going to brewlosophy.com and reading the Industry Speaks article that Marshall and I had worked on. He allowed me to kind of write when this first happened, right?
Yeah.
This is going back 2 years. And really this episode now is like a catalyst about a recent announcement that came that essentially some of the predictions I had made, whenever that was, I think like a year or two ago, have come true. And they were the predictions that were a little bit more dire, I think. But they were something that made sense. And they totally, it didn't surprise me at all that they had happened because, as the industry slows, as we were just talking about, a mega corporation with, significant investment money wants a return on their investment and they're willing to do what it takes to kind of get that.
That's
so
right.
One of the things that we had discussed in that article was the slashing of prices on commodities. And that was a big thing. So, it's no secret, I'm sure, to any of your listeners that you could probably guess what a homebrewer's biggest selling items are. And if you can't guess, I'll give you a hint. They're grains, hops, and yeast, right? Like that's
the ingredients,
caps, bottle caps.
Right.
So, just the basic commodities. So, because that's the reoccurring thing. Everyone needs that stuff. And so you come in and, when you have a situation like we're in now, where you have InBev essentially using the same type of like actions and practices they do in commercial brewing, which is, using their large financial clout to undercut smaller competitors and essentially stifle innovation, this is what happens. So I want to talk a little bit, if I may, about what the potential for that kind of move is. So there's always, and I'll preface by saying, just as I said in the article I wrote for you when it initially happened, and I'll rephrase it now, there's absolutely no fault on any customers who take advantage of that. They are doing exactly what they should be doing in the current, late stage capitalist economy, which is, you just, whatever it takes to save a buck, you should do. It's
right.
best for you. We get that. But there's an underbelly of this that could produce some seriously unintended consequences that I believe could be very harmful for the hobby as a whole. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. Essentially, homebrew shops are, in a sense, community centers.
Right.
Right. So a good homebrew shop, and I think most homebrew shops, even the small mom and pops, what they do right is they do act as community centers. People come and hang out.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, I have made really genuinely close friends from the Love2brew, and it's something that I wouldn't trade for the world. Guys I've my wife, their wives, we're all friends. We do events outside, we do private brews. I mean, these guys who I just really genuinely enjoy as people. And it's not surprising, right? Homebrewing attracts a wide range of experiences, of perspectives, of degrees and occupations.
Yep.
So it's just a melting pot for really cool people who all like to share a good beer. I mean,
right.
That's a good solution.
Yeah.
But aside from being a community center, they facilitate small-scale transactions. They connect people to one another. They do events and training, right? So they improve the skill set of the community.
Right.
In Love2brew's case, we drive a lot of traffic to the community clubs, right? Like many of the members of the clubs that surround us were recommended by Love2brew.
Yeah.
So they connect people, they recruit new brewers, and all of that kind of helps to foster new innovation. And I think the challenge is if we get to a point where the market decides, the collective home brewing community decides that I'm not interested in paying more, period. There's no other value that I'm interested in except the dollar value. If we see a mass die-off, and I should note, this isn't like an apocalyptic scenario, but like just the data that exists already, just so everyone's aware, is there's a very clear trend in shop closures, if you're not already aware. They've gone up consistently since 2012.
Yeah.
The variance, so what I mean by variance is when you take the number of homebrew shops open versus closed, that is on a downward trend, meaning that even with all the new openings, it's still not going above with all the closings that are happening.
Right, yeah.
The amount of homebrew shops right now in the U.S. are at the lowest point since 2012. Ugh. So they're higher than 2012, but that was the lowest point since.
Yeah.
So it had been upward. So there's a lot of really good data. This is something I have all the graphs made for my presentation, but essentially a lot of really good data that supports this. That like, okay, we're seeing kind of like the bottom 20 drop off, right? But the question is, how long will that continue? And more importantly, what happens to the home brewing if that continues?
Yeah.
Because if we cut out the bottom, if we cut out the community centers, what we're really doing is we're cutting out the entry points for many people.
Yeah.
Right? I'm sure Love2brew is not alone in this. There's many people who drive by our shop. We have a good location. It's right off. It's like literally 1 minute off Route 1, which is a major U.S. highway from the northeast to the southeast of the U.S. And we're like right off it. So people come by, they see our window has like taped signs say "Brew your own beer" in large letters. They're like, "Oh, what is this?" Right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's a great way to kind of get people in. And the challenge is if that bottom falls out, what you do now is you cut off a lot of the flow of new energy, new capital, and new minds into the hobby. And when you do that, you reduce the overall aggregate, dollar exchange, transaction exchanges within the homebrew industry as a whole.
Right.
The problem with that is when there's less money, there's less innovation, or more importantly, there's less incentive to innovate.
Right. Yeah.
Because we have a ton of innovators now in the space, and we're already in a very small niche. Let's say that niche got cut by a third. Well, I mean, how much more likely, if I'm an innovator, if I'm an inventor, if I'm someone who's an entrepreneur, do I want to go after this mature market that is shrinking?
Yeah.
If this happens, right? We're not saying that we're here, but we're saying if this happens, or do I want to go after a more open market? So the challenge, I think, with the homebrew industry, if customers as a whole decide that price is the only point that I'm going to purchase on, we risk really bottoming out the industry and kind of neutering the ability for new innovators to come in because the market just won't be big enough.
Yeah, no.
And that's kind of like a downward spiral because if we lack innovation in a hobby industry, that's like hobby suicide.
Yeah.
You must innovate. You must have new ideas. It's something we all do for fun. So the new biggest thing is always the most fun part.
It's why I feel like homebrewing is where it is today, is because of innovation and people doing different things and trying different things out. And I remember when I went to the homebrew shop in 2003 where I bought my first kit, they were literally selling, 4-gallon kettles that they got off the shelf at Walmart, like that was their, and you look at what is available to homebrewers nowadays, it is crazy. If you had lifted me up from 15 years ago, homebrewer, and put me in today into a Love2brew or a More Beer or one of these shops that offers all of these crazy, pieces of equipment and the amount of, oh my God, the amount of ingredients that are fresh. And it's just amazing, but that's because of the incentive to innovate.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And, this is, again, you can look at any industry, right? But anytime you have, once capital shrinks in an industry, the incentive to innovate is gone. And once the incentive to innovate is gone, interest dies.
Yeah.
So, and then you have it kind of controlled. And I think that's the big thing is, we're able to support, I say we, both from the perspective of Love to Brew and the imagined perspective of like the other major players in the industry. Many of the people who have kind of reached this tier where they feel very good and they're doing a certain amount of revenue, they have the the liquid capital to kind of go with the trends, the up and downs, and kind of weather the storm. But not everyone's going to have that luxury, so to speak. So that's something that I would say if your listeners are listening to and you believe in the industry as a whole, you believe as the community aspect, it's just something to consider. Now that also, again, going back to the point where it's not the customer's responsibility to fix this, that does reflect on the homebrew shops, right? If you're a homebrew shop listening, you have to be honest with yourself. Where is your business? Where what are you doing that's different? What are you doing to innovate? Because if your plan is just to sit idly by and rely on the goodwill of new business and new customers, I mean, I got news for you, man. Or woman, excuse me, but that's that is a path to a very negative reality.
Yeah, good luck, right?
Yeah. I mean, especially when we have to, right? Like you have to imagine that the homebrewing demographic, if you're not already aware, everyone is 25 to 65, upper middle class, males is the main demographic in terms of just statistical numbers. Those are people who homebrew, but people age, right? Like Love to Brew has been almost open every 10 years, which is essentially a generational shift. So now when you have people who are in their early 20s coming in, these are people who are going to come into the shop, talk to you for 30 minutes, and then look up prices on Amazon compared to your prices.
Yep, exactly.
Right in front of you.
Oh God.
So and it's fortunately, again, Love to Brew positions are, I can only speak from Love to Brew's perspective. Our prices are very competitive on a national level, and we monitor them consistently every year. Like we reevaluate them. So but we also have scale, and not everyone can do that, right? So that becomes even more challenging, right?
Yeah.
So there's got to be these value adds. There's got to be these innovations, and I think that's one of the big challenges that we may kind of run into.
Definitely, and I think there's a pretty big swath of the homebrewing globally community who really does see the value in going local. I mean, there's, you've got the kind of the keep things local movement happening. And I hear from people fairly regularly, who are saying, hey, listen, I'm going to go down and spend, an extra nickel per pound on grain at my local homebrew shop because I like them. That there is that community piece to it. And I think one of the things that comes to my mind, and this kind of is a crossover from the whole craft beer / big beer thing kind of into homebrewing as well, as particularly because I don't think this is the last we're going to see of big corporate people, coming in and trying to get their, put their shovel into the homebrewing soil, if you will, there's a kind of a psychological component for me. And, here, a perfect example is I get pretty fed up. I understand the argument against, don't go drink, your Miller Lite, Marshall, because you are just, you are a proving to people that it doesn't matter or whatever that is. And you're putting money, you're lining the pockets of this big beer company. But the reality is also if I take that stance and I am militant about that stance, then I am literally pushing out future potential craft beer drinkers because I could introduce them to that, And I feel like there's this fine line that I walk with that. And in the same way that, you've said it multiple times, and I completely agree with you, the person who gets introduced to homebrewing through Northern Brewer or Midwest, that's awesome because it means we have more homebrewers. And in my mind, kind of this way I think about it is, and as they get plugged in, they'll start to see what it is that those, these veteran homebrewers are seeing. And maybe potentially they'll make a decision to support the wider community, the actual homebrewing community, as opposed to that. But on some level, I have to at least be appreciative that this new person is making beer at home, which keeps, this hobby that I love kind of alight.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think any new home brewer, no matter which shop they go to, is a good new home brewer. And I have to give credit to my fellow New Jersey homebrew shops, the majority of them. We have a really, really good relationship and with the majority of them. And like, so for example, if there's like a shop I know called Brewers Apprentice which is about an hour south of us, and they're like a local like brewing premises. But Joe Allen's the owner, and I really have a great relationship with her. And she and I both, if like someone's like calling us from like Tom's River where she is, it's like, oh, Brewers Apprentice is like 5 minutes away from you. You should go to there. Like, don't drive an hour to come to us. Because I understand the value of having, Brewers Apprentice open, because they're introducing a ton of new people to the art of homebrewing.
Yeah.
And it is really good. But I think you mentioned something that I want to hit on, because I think it's not only is it a phenomenal point in terms of homebrewing, but it's really a reflection of our culture at large at the moment. And a big problem we have in a lot of aspects of our life is tribalism.
Oh my God. Amen.
And I think that what the challenge is we're having a big, the power of mass communication and the exponential growth of technology has done tremendous things, but it's also opened our eyes to a number of tremendous flaws that we have as a collective consciousness and as a collective people. And I think that this is something that is really, I don't want to, this is not to point fingers, but I think statistically it's a little bit more relevant, by generation. It's a demographic thing. It's an education thing, and there's a lot of factors that kind of go into this. But I think that like we and this is just my personal opinion, but I think that if you're a home brewer and you're open to it, just hear me out. I think that we need to, to Marshall's point, you shouldn't be bashing anyone. That's not helping anything. That's not helping anyone. It's not helping you. It's not helping the person you're talking to.
Right.
Let's break down these barriers. That's not reality. Those barriers are artificial. They don't exist.
I'll put it even more simple. Just chill out and let people do what they want to do, and realize that by bashing somebody over the head with your opinion that they shouldn't be drinking a Budweiser isn't going to change their mind. It's going to probably solidify their stance that you're a jerk, Yeah. But when they're drinking a Budweiser and you bring them over a Pliny the Elder, or you bring them over a Heady Topper, hey dude, here, have some of this one too. What do you think? Then maybe you're going to change your mind. But my goodness, all of the tribalism, all of the anger that's out there, it really gets under my skin as well. We've got a little bit more to talk about, but real quick, I want to remind everybody about a business that I believe is doing really awesome things for homebrewing in addition to Love to Brew, and that's Imperial Yeast, who packs 200 billion cells of the purest yeast into every pitch right pouch, over double what other labs provide, meaning fermentation kicks off fast and finishes quickly, leaving you with the delicious beer you hope for. Imperial Yeast has strains for every style you can think of. They offer incredible customer service, and they care just as much about homebrewers as they do professionals. Trust me, you will not regret using their yeast. Check out everything they have to offer at imperialyeast.com. Ron, so we're going to shift gears a little bit here. I honestly, this could be a 4-hour episode where we just go into the kind of the philosophy of the homebrew industry and all of that stuff. But, it's really rare that I meet a homebrewer who doesn't, or at least hasn't dreamt of opening their own brewery. I think that for a lot of people, it's that dream that keeps them continuing doing the hobby. And unfortunately, when it comes to that, and again, this could be its own show, I think there's a lot of, I don't want to point fingers either, but I think there's a lack of knowledge generally just about business and the way business works. And that's why I think that's a part of the reason we're seeing some of these craft brewery startups, these nano breweries, either failing to even get started or failing in their first year or so. But that aside, I'm definitely, my thing, I've thought about, the opening the brewery thing and all that, but I think what I've always dreamt most of was to do what you're doing and running just an awesome homebrew shop. A part of my drive being that I so value relationships and building that community and having a place to hang out and do cool stuff. Obviously, I've figured out other ways of getting involved in the homebrew industry unintentionally, but here we are. But for the person who might be interested in starting their own shop, do you have any keywords of advice, any tips that you might be able to give them? Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that you have to understand what the vision is that you want to create, because I think it's the same thing. It's comparable to like opening a brewery, right? If you love home brewing, if you love brewing beer, opening a homebrew shop is not what you should be doing. And even though I would argue that even opening a brewery is not what you should be doing, because when you open a homebrew shop, you no longer brew beer
your focus is no longer brewing beer. It's building community.
Right.
And those are two very different things. And I would say if you're thinking about opening a homebrew shop or really any business, but it's you need to put the due diligence in. You need to plan.
Yeah.
You need to research. You need to be intimately familiar with just the knowledge of brewing, of how to brew, so you're not giving bad advice, but also B, logistics, supply chain management, accounting, bookkeeping, managing a team. What hours you're going to work, how you're going to balance your family life, all that. I started Love2brew when I was 26. I had, I met my wife, I think my wife now, I met her, 4 months after I started opening Love2brew. So it was kind of lucky for me because she kind of met me at probably the worst in my stage of my life in terms of the amount of hours I was working, so it only got better. It wasn't like I had a relationship where I was working 40 hours a week and then all of a sudden I'm working 100.
Right.
It's no, she knew what I was working from the beginning.
Yeah.
But there's just so many factors. I think when you go into opening a shop, it's a business. It's a lot of work. It's a grind. It's a retail business. It's, obviously if you're doing it now, you should do an online component. An online component, by the way, is very challenging. We're in what you would call a red ocean right now. There's a lot of online competitors, at least 10 to 15, which are well established nationally.
Yeah.
So it makes it tough to kind of go from 0 to 1. I think that you want to focus on efficiencies, constantly be evaluating your numbers. But it's about if you don't know where to start, the first place you start is buy some business books and start reading.
Yeah.
That's really it. You have to put the time and effort into it because it's a serious commitment. Your people are going to come to you and rely on you to be there and to support this hobby. And there's nothing worse than a customer having a bad experience because you're tired and you're not focused or
right.
You're not able to deliver. There's a lot that goes into it. But it's just I would encourage it. I think, by the way, this is one thing I'm actually going to recommend in my talk in the industry councils. I think the AHA, the American Homebrew Association, does a lot to promote new homebrewers. I think that one of the ways to kind of combat this is to kind of promote more homebrew shops.
Yeah.
But really the homebrew shop, I would say you got to think about it in two ways. Do you want to do what we did, which was do you want to go in with a plan to scale? Is your objective to reach, 7 figures in revenue as quickly as possible and then maintain that? Or is your objective to, have a nice, side business where you can build community, foster it, but either you're okay living on the amount of income it would generate, which is not going to be a tremendous amount, or, you're okay building a team who can kind of manage it for you and you can kind of be there to oversee it. But really kind of get it at concrete. I will say this, and I'll make this offer for any philosophy listeners. If you guys are interested, Marshall, I don't know how you want to do it, but you guys can feel free to email me. My email is ron@love2brew.com. I'm happy to talk to anyone who's interested in kind of doing this because I think it's a good thing if more shops open.
Yeah.
But you got, again, do your due diligence. Don't open where there's a shop, 10 miles away. That's silly. Our market's not that big,
right?
To support that.
And I feel like that's a quick way to make even if it's covert an enemy, right? Now you are basically saying, well, I can offer one better than you. Now I do think there are those instances where in certain communities there's room for more than one shop. Particularly and I hear from people all the time telling me, dude, I shop online because where I live, the shop is crap. They don't offer anything that I want. Everything is old. Then that makes sense. And that's the way the market works. I once heard something that I may have made this up, but I'm constantly thinking it when it comes to people trying to jump into craft brewing and whatnot. But it's that passion alone does not produce profit, and you have to have knowledge. You have to have something more than just I really like doing this thing, Yeah,
I would say honestly, if I can give 2 pieces of genuine advice, I think they're applicable to any business. But the things that I feel that have allowed me to have success, both in Love2brew and other ventures and just personal life, the 2 main things are discipline, right? It's just you got to take the thought out of it. You got to be. I have a very, very regimented schedule. From 7:30 a.m. till 11:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. The actions aren't the same, but the schedule and the time blocks are the same. Yep. And I'm for lack of a better term, I'm religious with it.
Yep.
And it's how I stick to my It's how I'm able to produce and keep sane, because I have a big problem. Like if I don't take my Sundays and plan out my week and really detail everything out and my tasks and prioritize them, I find that midweek I really struggle with kind of finding a direction. So taking the time to plan and be disciplined. And that's not just, by the way, it's not just work. I'm disciplined with my exercise. I'm disciplined with my eating. I'm disciplined with the time I spend with my family, right? Like I make sure I have that time, because these things are all important to me. So, you need to be able to balance that. And the best way to have work-life balance is to, be a master of personal and self-discipline. And the second thing I would say is just be conscious of time. Time is your biggest resource as a business owner, really as a human being, but as a business owner especially, like all the money in the world is not going to make up for your time. And if you're not really being conscious of if you're not being present and conscious and saying, all right, at this very moment, what am I doing to maximize the reality, the potential to create the reality I wish to see, to maximize the impact that I can have in my community, to maximize, how I'm serving my customers. If I'm not doing something in this very moment to do that, I'm wasting my time. And just being aware of that.
Yeah, I could not agree more with those bits of advice. I mean, again, what we're doing is totally different. I'm more in the media side of things, and you run a shop, but it is the same thing. We've got a calendar. I stick to it. I don't break away from it. In the times that I'm finding myself going outside of those timeframes that I set up for myself, I do stress a little bit, and it's not comfortable. I don't like that. And so I was talking to someone at work the other day, and they were asking how I'm able to do all of these things. I have another little side business that not many people know about as well. But I've got these three big main things that I do, and it's a part of it. I think, like you said, discipline, and I feel like there's an element of personality. I hate to say that because it sounds like, oh, haha, I was born with it, but that's not what I mean. I feel like you can really hone in and shape, your personality to some degree, and forcing yourself to be disciplined and to care enough about something, whether that something is brewing the best beer, or making a podcast that sounds decent, or running a shop that's going to be successful, but committing, just absolutely doggedly committing to making sure that it works out. And I don't know how else to explain that experience for me, like on a psychological level. I refuse to let a commitment fail. I refuse to, or at least fall through. Now, what I produce might not be everybody's favorite, but I'm going to do what I planned on doing, from a practical perspective. Like, this show is going to get done. You're going to have a episode every week. You're going to have 2 articles every week, and there's just nothing that's going to change that. And I feel like there's an element of that goes into, ensuring, success on some level.
Yeah, I agree. One thing, it's funny because I was telling you before we started about, like, I had an interview yesterday. One thing we were talking about was, aside from Love to Brew, like one of my hobbies I've had for over 2 decades now is I've been wrestling and playing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for at least like 21 years now, like nonstop. I was very competitive for a while. And what that really taught me about my life was the aspect of how, like, to gain mastery, like understanding mastery. And the key to mastery is just showing up. It's just doing it, right? It's not, and that's the thing that I think there's the biggest, when someone, going back to your point about, like, oh, I want to open a homebrew shop, like, what do I do? Well, the first thing you do is you get books and you start reading and you start understanding business. And you know what? It's going to suck. It's going to be awful. You're going to be bad at it. It's going to be boring, right? Yeah. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Every day you take an hour and you do it. And eventually, all of a sudden, it gets easy, right? Like, I'm sure when you first did your first couple podcasts, it's like, man, this is a lot of work. And now they're probably just so natural. And I mean, this has been a super easy conversation, a very easy flow. Even for those of you guys listening, even the behind the scenes stuff you're not hearing is incredibly quick. It's like, I make YouTube videos for a nonprofit project I'm working on, and it's taking me hours. It's terrible. Like, I'm so bad at it, but it doesn't matter. You'll get better. And man, so I totally understand where you're coming from. And I think that's enlightened advice for a lot of people. well, very cool. Ron, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate what you're doing, not just for homebrewing and with Love to Brew,
but for supporting us here at Brewlosophy. We've been friends for a few years now. And then also thank you so much for, just taking time out of your Saturday to come and chat with us. I feel like this is really important information. And as I said, in the opening of the show, as boring as the title might have made it sound, because it's not about an experiment or anything like that, I do think not only that it's important, but that if you really, afford yourself some time to consider what it is that we talked about and how, the decisions that you make impact this hobby that we all love. I think that's a good thing. So, Ron, anything else you want to leave our audience with before we say goodbye, man?
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. This has been an awesome experience. And it was my pleasure. This is a fun way to, start my Saturday afternoon. And yeah, for everyone at home, again, support your local homebrew shop, go out there and, don't be afraid. Here's one thing, guys. If you think you have a homebrew shop that really stinks, don't be afraid to say something. A good business owner is going to want your feedback. So if you say, hey, man, your stuff is old, you need to do better inventory management to make sure you move your product based on your sales. Any advice, I think any business owner worth their salt is going to want to hear what you have to say. I know at Love to Brew where, I really appreciate the negative feedback. I mean, it's cool. We have like 500 plus 5-star reviews. But I would love, when someone calls us jerks and tells us we're the worst, I mean, that's the guy I want to talk to.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
How can we improve? Like, we're serious about that. So, just obviously support your local homebrew shop and do what you can. And hopefully if you guys, obviously, make sure you keep listening to Brewlosophy. That's a very important part of it. And go from there.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah. Well, hey, if you're listening and you want to support a business that's doing great things for the hobby, be sure to check out Love2brew.com. And don't forget to head over to brewlosophy.com to read our experiments. You can read the article that Ron wrote for us, The Industry Speaks. You can check out the Hop Chronicles, Short and Shoddy, and everything else we're up to. The Brewlosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brewlosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brewlosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brewlosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey cause it suits my bro. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman no more.